Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to a mix of r/malicious compliance, revenge and neighbor HOA stories. In this video, an HOA sues OP for unpaid fines even though he has never joined the HOA to begin with. Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled HOA War. So, when I moved into my house, there was no HOA. I bought my house in December 2018, the neighborhood formed an HOA in September 2019. In the state I live in, I have the option of joining the HOA or not joining the HOA. Me and my wife chose not to join. In the HOA's eyes, this was strike one. They started their constant attempts to get us to join. All attempts were turned away. After months of these attempts, I finally threatened police intervention. After a month of peaceful silence, the fines started appearing in my mailbox. When the fines started coming in, I contacted a lawyer. She said as long as I have a copy of the HOA contract that shows I denied being in the HOA, I would be fine. Now I had a copy of the HOA contract that stated I was not part of the HOA. It was signed by myself, my wife and the HOA board. Fast forward 1 year to September 2020, I receive a summons to court. The summons basically says I am being sued due to unpaid HOA fines. I show the summons to my lawyer and she says I have nothing to worry about as long as I produce the copy of the contract that shows that I'm not a part of the HOA. The court date arrives and the HOA produces an altered copy of the contract that shows me joining the HOA. It literally looked like somebody had used whiteout to cover up my checkmark next to the part that said not joining the HOA. Then they checked off the box that had me joining the HOA. When it was my turn, I stood up and showed that the contract they showed was doctored. Then I presented mine, along with the evidence of them trying to get me to join the HOA even after my wife and I had said no. I finished my argument with, if I had joined the HOA at the beginning, then why would they need to keep asking me to join? Needless to say, the judge tore them a new a-hole and ordered them to disband the HOA. Life in the neighborhood has since become much simpler. And by the way guys, I have found a new passion, which is looking up HOA meetings gone wrong on YouTube. There are some absolutely horrifying but also hilarious situations you can find on YouTube about HOA meetings gone incredibly wrong. I would highly recommend you to search that term on YouTube. And the next one is a little revenge story and it is titled How My Grandpa Became the Owner of a Gas Station / Garage. My family immigrated to America in the 1880s and settled in Nebraska. We were farmers for the first 80 years or so, but back in the 1960s my great-grandma decided she was going to sell the entire farm before she died and simply gave her sons 1/3 of the money for inheritance when she passed away. She had 3 sons. In 1969, my great-grandma passed, and her 3 sons inherited the money she had earned from selling the farm. My grandpa decided he would basically let that money sit until after he retired from the military. In 1971, he deployed to Vietnam for his second and final deployment. At the end of his deployment, he returned to Nebraska and retired after 22 years in the service. Now he had an old Chevy truck at the time and was in the process of building a concrete business with the money he had gotten from his inheritance. Well, during this time, his truck engine blew up. My grandpa was busy at the time and he didn't want to fool with the truck because he was busy. So he bought himself the engine he wanted to replace it with, which was an upgrade, and he went down to the only garage in town and asked them if they would be willing to put the engine in the truck. They agreed on a price and told him to come back in a week or so. A week later, my grandpa comes back and picks up the truck. He admits he felt like a fool for not double checking the work, but assumed since this was the son of his friend that the son would do right by him. This was a small town. Well, my grandpa opens up the concrete business and he is busy, and it comes time for his first oil change. This is about 4 months after he got the truck back. He is doing the oil change and he notices that the engine he bought is not the engine in his truck. It is a smaller engine, and this obviously pisses him off to high heaven, as my grandma liked to say. So he storms on down to the garage and talks to the shop. Earl was the owner. Earl comes out and denies any wrongdoing, says he did as he was told and it shouldn't have taken him 4 months to bring the issue up. My grandpa tells Earl he needs to do what is right. Earl refuses. It is important to note this is a small town. Written contracts and so forth really is not a thing. Your worth is your word. My grandpa tells Earl he is going to get him for this. Earl laughs and tells him to leave his shop. My grandpa goes down to the county and requests the record for who owns that gas station. Turns out it is an old family friend named Harold. My grandpa stops by Harold's house and starts inquiring about the business deal Harold has with Earl. Harold says, well, Earl rents the gas station and garage from him. My grandpa asks Harold how is everything going, and Harold confides that Earl hasn't paid his rent in 2 months. My grandpa asks, do you have a written lease with Earl? To which Harold goes, nah, I sure don't. My grandpa then asks, what if I bought the gas station / garage from you? Harold is not completely on board with the idea, but my grandpa makes a strong point. Earl is not paying his rent, Harold doesn't seem like he has much interest in being a landlord anymore, and my grandpa has the cash to buy the place outright. Harold, sensing something is up, asks my grandpa, did Earl do something to you? You seem awfully interested in this garage. Ain't you busy with the concrete business of yours? And my grandpa fills Harold in on the story. My grandpa also mentions that he has a son, my father, who needs something to do, and he would be happy to buy the whole building from Harold for a fair price, and what happens after that is his business. Also, it is important to note, when Harold decided to rent this business to Earl, in that deal went all the equipment and tools that Harold had acquired over the years, so those belonged to the building. Harold and my grandpa came to a number that they both agreed on. A few days later, my grandpa paid Harold in cash in full for the business. The paperwork is done and my grandpa is now the proud owner of a gas station and mechanics shop. Now my grandpa senses that Earl ain't going to be pleased when my grandpa fires Earl, so for extra good measure, my grandpa calls up the local sheriff, who is a high school friend, and asks the sheriff to come with him to break the news to Earl. So my grandpa and the sheriff go down to Earl's now former business and they walk in, and before my grandpa can even say hello, Earl says, "No, I told you, I didn't cheat you." My grandpa smiles and says, "I'm not here about my truck, I'm here to fire you." Earl, with a look of confusion on his face, asks, "You cannot fire me, I own this business." My grandpa shows him the title and says, "I'm now the owner of this building," to which Earl fires back, "But I got a deal with Harold." And the sheriff speaks up, "You do? Do you have a lease?" "Well, no, Earl says," to which the sheriff smiles and says, "In that case, you're going to need to take your stuff and leave." Earl is fuming pissed, grabs his toolbox and storms out. My grandpa ended up hiring the mechanic that would occasionally work on his trucks at his concrete business. He had my aunt and grandma run the gas station full time and my dad would work there after school. We owned that garage for 25 years before my grandpa sold it to someone else. And ripe stars, we all know the best revenges come from grandpas or grandmas. And by the way, if you want to listen to a great grandma revenge, then please check out yesterday's video. And while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you wish to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. And the next one is a little malicious compliance story, and it is titled, "There was an attempt to fire me for malicious compliance." So in 2012 I found myself working as an overnight maintenance laborer for a family-owned collection of properties. 2 shopping complexes, a winery, a few warehouses, etc., but most of the time I was working keeping a grocery store built in the late 60s functioning. I worked my way up to night maintenance manager and I loved my job. I was getting the kind of education you cannot buy, hands-on electrical one night, plumbing the next, welding after that, all taught to me by 3 men that could build a house up to code single-handedly. And we all got along great. It was the first time in my adult life I had real responsibilities and I was respecting myself because I respected the job I was doing. The owners were all people that truly cared about their employees and they proved this when in 2017 they sold the main grocery store. One of the many things they included in the sale was all current employees had to be offered a new position at their current pay level. The company that bought us, I won't say their name but think the opposite of dangerous path, does not employ an in-house maintenance team. Something breaks, they outsource the fixing of it. So they didn't really have a ready-made place for me to fit into like the other department managers. The store manager also did not like that I was making $18 an hour, $6 over a new hire rate. Thus began the systematic, what I saw as harassment and what has been later confirmed to me as standard operating procedure for legally getting rid of someone at this company. Some of my favorites include making my 35-year-old ass a bag boy, jokes on you, I love doing easy work for good money, writing me up for spending 20 minutes talking to the police about an accident I had seen while returning cards. I thoroughly enjoyed the district manager apologizing to me for that. Also cutting my hours down from full-time to 24 hours a week, which is completely allowable, but as the second most senior member in the store, everyone below me has to get their hours cut first. And no, you cannot force me to take a salaried manager's position, but yes, you can make me a cashier, a position you know I don't want, but you have to give me the $3 pay bump. And on and on and on. In addition to the many broken verbal promises and out lies, I became very well versed on the union rules, my specific contract rules and how to protect myself. 7 union arbitrations in my first 5 months all ended in my favor. Meanwhile, the assistant managers love me. I can cover any department because I've done most everything and I'm a quick learner for what I don't know. Anything breaks down in the store, it was falling apart before they bought it. If I cannot fix it, I can at the very least make a detailed work request so it gets fixed sooner. I become the go-to cover guy filling in any position that needs it. Which at long last brings me to my malicious compliance. The store was not doing well sales-wise. About a year and a half in, they couldn't get a closing butcher. So the night manager taps me to work in the meat department for 3 hours every night just to close it out and clean it up. In the department there is a band saw that is used for cutting meat with bones in it. It's a pain in the butt to clean, so after reading the department manual I realized you were not to use that piece of equipment if you hadn't been trained on it. Now, I 100% had been trained on that bone saw. I knew how to take it apart, fix it and put it back together, but that training was with the old company and I'd been informed many times that the new company only thought I had been trained when they had trained me. Perfect. I can close down the bone saw earlier and get it cleaned. If any customer needs me to cut meat with a bone in it, I inform them that I hadn't been trained on that piece of equipment, shouldn't be an issue. This is late night and the store is not doing that well to begin with. I clear all this with the assistant manager. This goes on for months until finally I am called into the manager's office during the day. Turns out, one of the customers I had informed about that I couldn't use the bone saw was a secret shopper. The store manager is writing me up for failure to complete my duties. She is also writing it up as malicious failure. I forgot the term they use. It is basically 2 write-ups instead of just 1, and that coupled with my previous write-up, I was 15 minutes late once, that is on me, gives her the 3 write-ups she needs to fire me. As I have done so many times in the past with this woman, I invoke my right to union representation and decline to talk with her until after I have spoken with them. At this point I am thinking, they cannot bust me, I was following the written directions. But oh no, it got so much sweeter and so much worse. While talking to my union rep, it quickly becomes clear that the butchers are a completely different union. The store is in violation of the butchers union contract by having a non-union employee work at that department. So first my union fights the write-up, wins and gets me paid for the 4/5 days I missed off work. They then get me a lawyer who tells me that I am not to speak with any store manager in any capacity due to the butchers union complaint against the store. 2 weeks off fully paid for me. I cannot very well work at a store where I cannot speak to my bosses. I then get 2 more days off paid while I speak to the various union reps for my testimony. The store is fined $50,000 is what I was told for breach of butcher's contract. When I return to work, my store manager does not work there anymore. Her replacement only accepts the job if his bonuses are not tied to the store's overall performance, so he doesn't mind if I am overpaid. As icing on the cake, no one really liked her, so I am damn near a hero when I get back. And the next one is titled, Never Steal Cookies from the Computer Savvy. So this happened a few years ago. My office went to the open layout plan. They got rid of cubicles and basically it turned into what we call the call center. Desks lined up next to each other and no privacy from coworkers. Each person gets a laptop, a dock and 2 monitors on arms. I get placed next to this gentleman I will call John. John was a fairly nice guy, we got along pretty well. He is probably 10 years older than me. One day my coworker, I will call Dan, showed up to talk to John. They start chit-chatting and I decide to stroll to the cafeteria to see if they had any freshly made peanut butter cookies. And oh boy, they did. Still warm too. It should be a crime to sell them because they are addictive. I make my way back to my desk and Dan is still there. He says something to me and we start chatting. I place my cookies on my desk and turn to engage in the conversation with him. We talk back and forth a minute and he says he has to go. Not wanting to waste the warmth of those delicious cookies, I turn around to find them not there. Did I misplace them? A bit of searching and I come to the conclusion that I didn't. So I scope out my coworker's desk for signs of my cookies, empty plastic wrap, crumbs, etc., but I find nothing. I ask my coworker John if he saw them and he denies any involvement, but I wasn't buying it. At a bit of pressure and he cracks. Says he stole my cookies as a joke and gave them back, none were eaten. No harm done, right? Wrong. They were cold. I wanted those damn cookies still warm, and here I had 3 miserably cool but still pretty delicious cookies. So I verbally vowed revenge. Now I like to consider myself technically inclined, so my revenge could not be rage-fueled but cold like my cookies, calculated and intelligent. After a month of quiet contemplation, enough time for him to forget, I found the perfect tool. A wireless mouse. I slapped that dongle in the back of his dock where he would be none the wiser. Now I could mess with him whenever and however I wanted, but I had to be smart about it as to not get caught or do something detrimental to his work. For example, the coworker would come over to chat with John. John turns his chair to chat and I secretly get to work by pulling out the mouse, open an unrelated application like Windows Media Player, which by the way was on his taskbar, and hide the mouse. He would turn around confused and continue his day. Another example would be lunchtime. He would get up to warm his lunch without locking his computer. He would have some applications open and I would minimize them. He would come back and mumble under his breath and act confused. More subtle things would be changing where his cursor was in a Word document or email. Since he was a keyboard looker when he typed, he would type his current thoughts in the wrong spot and it would take him a few seconds to realize his mistake. This went on for weeks. Some days I would hit him several times and others none. No harm done, except he started getting paranoid. Since he knew I was technically inclined, he would ask, "What could make Windows Media Player start?" I asked him what he was talking about and he let me know what his computer was doing. I gave him some puzzled looks and plausible reasons like task scheduler or maybe a virus, and he then started keeping a log of these incidents. As time went on, I became bolder in my revenge. Instead of waiting for him to get up or talk to a coworker, I would do it when he would be writing on paper at his desk or looking at his phone. Cue my screw up though. It was about 7 weeks in when one day he was playing with his phone when I went to change his cursor location in an email and he saw it move. He looks at me, sees my hand under the desk and says, "I suspected it was you." The ruse was up, I admitted it, he laughed, checked the back of the dock and found the dongle, and then it hit him. "This was because of the cookies, wasn't it?" And that is how I gained a reputation of being a cookie monster. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. However, this is not the end of ripe content for you. I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will hopefully soon show up on the left corner of the screen, which will provide you with hundreds, if not thousands of hours of ripe content. If you still haven't gotten enough, then please also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you will only find on there. Furthermore, if you want to share your own story with our community, then please head on over to r/ripestories on Reddit, where you can share your own stories and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. Thank you so much for your daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.